The Murders at Karlov Manor set is coming with some powerful white cards that people are thinking may be playable in the white weenie or Death and Taxes archetypes of old formats like Modern and Legacy. And as someone who is an aficionado or a big fan of those styles of decks, I want to talk about those cards today and how I felt about them. There's a classic discussion around any white card and whether it'll see play in D&T as soon as the card gets previewed. My favourite one ever was Brightling, where people were convinced that this card would absolutely push the deck to be tier 1 in Legacy at all times, and it sucked. Meanwhile, people slept on Palace Jailer and Recruit of the Guard, both cards that I'll hold my hands up and say, I thought they were great, I thought they were amazing, and they were. Okay, I was right on those occasions, but I'm also wrong on some occasions. I just don't bring it up again. Before we get into the cards, just a quick shout out to CoolStuffInc.com. They're the main sponsor of the channel. If you're buying anything from Karlov Manor, you get 5% off your order by using the code Kenobi, and you get this free Orc Army token that shows me and my dog fighting back the Orc hordes. And also don't forget, I'm streaming live on Whatnot twice a month. I'm streaming this Thursday. I'll be giving away Ravnica Remastered collector boosters, and I'll also be auctioning off other bits and bobs and selling some singles. If you use the code in the description below, you get £10 off your first purchase. So buy a card for £10, get it for free. It's just free money, really. Let's talk about Delny, Streetwise Lookout. 3 mana, 2/2, legendary creature, human scout. Creatures you control have power 2 or less, can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. So it makes your 2 power creatures unblockable by big fatties. That's a reasonable ability. The second ability is the one that's got people's chins are wagging and dicks are flapping. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Whoa, okay. That sounds like it's going to be pretty decent, right? Well, the problem I have with this is that it doesn't really trigger any of the stuff we really want it to. In both Modern and Legacy, this will get you 2 equipments of a Stoneforge Mystic, and in Legacy, it will get you 2 creatures for a Recruit of the Guard. Both of those are very, very good, doubling up on already good cards. A bit win more in some cases, but giving you like raw card advantage in Legacy, that's not bad. On top of that, another card that's seeing a bit of play in Legacy and Modern is Samwise the Stout-Hearted, a 2 mana 2/1, which again, it returns something that's come from your battlefield into your grave at that turn, so you get 2 things if you manage to get 2 things into the yard. The point I'm getting at is that it basically doubles a lot of the card advantage triggers, Esper Sentinel being another one that immediately jumped out to me of a card that we could see play in these kind of decks in Eternal formats. But it's not really doing anything for like Leonin Arbiters, it doesn't trigger on Flickerwist, does nothing with Thalia, does nothing with Revoker, Canonist, Spirit of the Lab. Spirit of the Lab both doesn't fit the criteria and doesn't have a triggered ability. I just don't think there's enough triggered abilities for this to matter. The top clause, where creatures of power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures of power 3 or greater, that in the combination with the second line could get us somewhere. A Mirroring Crusader being completely unblockable is nice, but the thing about a Mirroring Crusader is that you want to equip them with a sword or a jit. Now, with a jit, they can still get through unblocked, but with a sword, they can't because they're too big. It doesn't play well with the equipments, the Caldras, the Battle Skulls. So I'm not convinced that this is Legacy or Modern playable in particularly Death and Taxes. Maybe it has a home somewhere else where the triggered ability doubling is much, much better. People aren't really shouting about this one for D&T with Unyielding Gatekeeper, but I still want to cover it. A 2 mana 3/2 that has Disguise. So Disguise is a mechanic from this set that is Morph, essentially, but the Morph that is face down has Ward 2. If you don't know what Morph is, it's where you pay 3 colorless mana to put the creature face down as a 2/2. And in this case, like I said, you get Ward as well. And then you can flip it up with its Disguise cost at any time as a special action that doesn't use the stack, importantly, if it works like Morph. I could be wrong on that, but I'm assuming the Disguise cost is a special action that doesn't use the stack, much like Morph was. However, when you flip this up, there's a trigger that goes on the stack. Whenever it's turned face up, exile another target non-land permanent. If you controlled it, return to the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, its controller created 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. So this is a 3/2 for 2, which already gives it a little bit more oomph or bang for its buck. It's already more aggressively statted than you'd expect from white 2-drops. But the thing with this is that you need to disguise it and then undisguise it in order to get that payoff, in order to get that powered up ability. Now, a disguised creature having a ward is pretty good when you're trying to equip equipment to them. You don't want to have your opponent blow that plan out by having 1 mana up and a push or a lightning bolt. So I think this card actually might have a bit of value there. Also, there's another disguised card I want to talk about in a moment that also might be good. The other reason this card is kind of nuts is that A, it removes the opponent's creature, just gives them a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token, which we can play around. We can have a Sword of War and Peace, for example, to give pro white, so we always be able to get through with the creature. But on top of that, it actually flickers one of your things. Flickers Wisps, Recruit of the Guard, Stoneforge Mystics, Restoration Angels for some really crazy shit in some formats. Essentially, the being able to flicker your own thing and remove your opponent's thing is so interesting and modal that it's the kind of card that I think ends up being quite good in Death and Taxes. The tricksy, control-based white weenie decks that I like to play. I think this card's got more play than Delny, although interestingly, on flipping it up, Delny causes it to trigger twice, which is super interesting for some stuff. Assemble the Players is the one that people are most hot about and tagging me on social media about. 2 mana, enchantment, may look at top card of your library at any time. Once each turn, you may cast a creature spell with power 2 or less from top of your library. Now, the 2 or less thing for Delny was a bit rough because a lot of our 2 or lesses don't do anything with the triggered doubling. In this case, this does allow you to cast Thalias, Aethsworn Canonists, and just God knows what kind of hate bears off the top of your library. Leland Arbiters and similar. Now, the wonderful thing about this is that it gives us just some actual card advantage, which is strictly speaking quite difficult in white. The downside is that the Legacy deck can freely play fetches and splash of colour in Legacy, but in Modern, when you're playing Arbiter and you want to mess with people shuffling, you don't really want to play fetch lands because it makes the deck really, really awkward. And thus, you're going to struggle to shuffle your library. Now, the reason I bring this up is that when you can look at the top of your card of your library and play it, like with this or an Oracle of Moldiah, the effect gets like triply as good. I'm going to say triply, yeah. I'm going to say the effect goes fucking from like 100% to 300% effective when you can start manipulating the top of your library. Now, that could be a Brainstorm. So this actually might be good. I don't know, Esper mid-range, Esper 3-drops, the Soul Hunter deck that I've played in Legacy in the past with Baleful Strix and shit. Oh, Baleful Strix with Delny. Maybe that's a thing. But so you Brainstorm to put things on top and then play off the top. It gets you some card advantage, similar to how Oracle of Moldiah has always worked. But actually, fetch lands. So it would be good with this too, because you can look at the top card of your library. If it's not what you need or not what you want to cast, it just doesn't meet the criteria, you crack a fetch, shuffle your library, and you get a second attempt to draw a card, essentially. I don't hate this card. I think it being a 2-mana enchantment that's made more expensive by Thalia is rough. I think the fact that you can't play your Wisps and similar off the top is rough. But I don't hate it. And I don't think it does enough in Legacy, for example, to be playable main deck against like a format where you can get like quite early turn 1, 2, or 3 combo killed. But as a sideboard card in grinding matchups against mid-range decks and the Beans decks and stuff like that, I think this might actually be okay. So far out of the 3, this is the one I pick, but I'm still not convinced we'll be able to play it. Do remember though, on the shuffling conversation, Stoneforge Mission does shuffle your decks. We do have a couple of shuffle effects, as does Recruiter. So again, stronger in Legacy than it is in Modern. Now, this is one that people probably aren't thinking about. A 3-mana 2/4 flying vigilant creature, which is at the beginning of your upkeep, investigate once for each opponent who has more cards in hand than you. The idea of making a delayed like draw that you can sink your mana into is quite nice. It's a 2/4 as well, so its body is started in a way that it can block Deathrite, Shaman, Dragon Rage Channelers and Delvers in the air, which is always relevant in a total format like Timeless and Legacy. I think this is okay. I could see a world where it's good. It gives you that grinding element as well, doesn't die the bolt. This is an absolutely reasonable card, and probably better than people are giving it credit for. No one's really talking about it for D&T, but that's kind of what happens with Death and Taxes. It's that, like, just the weirdest shit becomes playable because the deck is always tuning itself towards whatever the best deck in the format is. Importantly, in Legacy, you can't fetch off a Recruiter, so that gives it quite a big downside. And now, before we come to one that I really think is a bit off base, but people aren't going to expect it and probably think I'm crazy, to go back to Delny, I do want to acknowledge that this card is kind of nuts in CDH, as if you get to like play a Dockside Extortionist or Esper Sentinel with this, the doubling on triggers and those things in a CDH environment does give you so much value. Problem is, again, you're committing 3 mana to a potential do nothing if those cards aren't in hand or in play. I keep going back to Delny because Delny's got a lot to talk about. Okay, this one is one again that people aren't really talking that much about. I saw some casual Commander players say, wow, this is a lot of text and does a lot. I agree. It's a 4-mana 4/2 with flying, lifelink, and ward 2. So already we have a flying creature with protection that also helps with aggressive races. Its downside of being a 2 toughness, meaning it dies to an unpowered up Unholy Heat or unblocks against the vast majority of aerial threats in like Legacy, for example, means that that's a little rough. But we can always fix that with a Maul of the Skyclaves, a Jit. Well, actually, Jit doesn't really fix it unless we're already hit with it, or any number of sorts. The interesting thing about this, though, is that it's got Disguise. Now, there's 2 things here. One, if we're playing the Cleric I mentioned earlier, the Elephant Cleric, then having 2 different Disguise cards in your deck gives your opponent pause for thought about which one they're targeting. And then this is when Aurelia's Vindicator's turn face up, exile up to X other creatures from the battlefield or creature cards from graveyards. And when she leaves the battlefield, you return those cards to their owner's hands. So it's graveyard hate, it's removal for blockers and onboard creatures. It can also just put creatures in your graveyard and in your play back into your hand, which means you can undisguise it to save a creature on board that's been targeted by a removal spell, or just get some card advantage out of your graveyard. These, like, again, it's modal. It's got so many options off the back of its thing. The only problem is that you're looking at 5 mana to flip it and choose one singular thing. But 5 mana isn't impossible in these decks, but it's quite late game, and you're not going to reliably hit it. I do think this card's going to have a home somewhere. It's probably going to be standard, I'd imagine. This card just seems so good and push, but then most of the legendary creatures in this set have 3 different keywords. This has 3 keywords. It's kind of wild how much text and how many rules we get to fit onto a singular card these days. So I don't hate this for D&T, but again, I'll give it a go, maybe. But 5 mana is such a tall order that I'm probably not going to play it outside of a deck that's going to be playing Mana Dork. So the Noble Heart, green, white, in Modern, I might try playing 1 copy of this. But the fact that it's only on reveal and not upon Enter the Battlefield means you can't flicker it and get any interesting tricks off that. So it's okay. Bearing in mind with the disguise and the ward, something that we should talk about is that it's already disguised as ward on the other side, so you can't flip this and trigger the ward again, but your opponent is paying 2 extra mana to fire off the ward into it the first time. Now, keep in mind that a bolt will kill this on this side, but a fatal push would fail to kill it if they haven't got revolt enabled if you flip this over to become a 4-drop. It's not going to come up that much, but if you are playing this in some format like Timeless or Historic or even Modern, that could come up. And that's my take for the impressive white cards so far. 1 uncommon, 2 rares, and 2 mythics. Let me know if you think I'm off base. Ultimately, I don't think any of these are truly playable, but I'm not completely against Assemble the Players, and I'm a little bit mild on Unyielding Gatekeeper, because I think the card is interesting. The disguise mechanic is generally interesting. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.